Welcome to True Health Tuesday, and the truth will set you free. Tonight we have two versions of truth. The first 20 minutes is going to be versions of truth that I feel that the Ministry of Truth will allow us to go because the censorship is designed to protect you. Those of you that are not worried about the censorship protection, you can stand in there for the next 20 minutes. Weird, isn't that's true? Martin Luther King. Freedom is never, and this is for everyone that actually wants to live in a country where you have freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. Okay, just like we used to have. Freedom is never voluntary, voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Martin Luther King. Yeah. So you see the COVID-19. Get ready for the COVID 20, 21, 22, 23. Okay, and it'll keep coming back. So this isn't the first, this is just the first round, the test case. And if you're curious about it, look at Event 201. But let's look at this, okay? Now, this is modern technology, what you're looking at here. See, at the time, in the 1300s, they felt that the hypothesis was the disease came from bad air, malaria. Something was bad with it. So you had this long snout shoved with, or snout with herbs. So you breathe in that. And so that way the bad air wouldn't get you. Red lenses, because sin was also a contributing factor. And of course, evil spirits can't pass through red lenses. You had a wax-covered coat, so sputum and blood can wash off. Now, the therapies were interesting. The therapies were isolation. Yes, it is still used today and just as effective, except they were isolating sick people. Okay, we got way better. We isolate everybody. Okay, yeah, even kids, old people, doesn't matter. Okay, bleeding. Now, the theory, that was practiced for 5,000 years. So that you get the bad blood out, okay? Of course, they didn't have any antiseptic, and, not a lot of people were washing at the time, and they didn't understand about wound cleaning a little bit. Quicksilver, and this is where the term quack came from. Mercury worked for everything, killed any kind of problem. Of course, we did have Mad Hatter's disease back then, and incantations. Now, this was top technology. And you might be wondering, well, if you could afford or you had good medical care back then, this is one of the reasons the wealthy died at a greater rate. Now, this is the hypothesis, a few hundred years later, that germs cause disease, and germs are everywhere. Good God, you don't have an immune system. Because if you look at this, it's similar. Now, the technology is to cover your face and nose. Why? Because germs are everywhere. Okay? We're not talking about that 45% of your DNA is viral. We're not talking how you need a normal gut flora. With viruses, bacteria have to be inside of you. You need a normal flora on your skin. We have a relationship. None of that stuff is talked about now. So the hypothesis is that the germs are going to get you. Now, you have to be careful nowadays because anyone that you come close to emits these unseen enemy, okay, through coughing or particles or anything, and everyone is vulnerable. So isolation. Now, lockdown is interesting. So this means that you can go to Walmart, but you can't go to church or to the synagogue. You can go to a liquor store, okay, because that's considered essential, but and you could also go to a gun store, but you can't go to your mosque or church or synagogue. Now, the drugs, okay, the drugs are designed to change symptoms, not to really protect you. Ventilators, that was the thought. Of course, they had a 90% death rate. And vaccines. Now, the interesting one, we can't talk about it in this environment, but the ones that look like they're going to be approved first have to be held at a negative 70 degrees centigrade, so it doesn't degrade, and then it's injected in you. But we're going to talk about that in the area that I feel that the censors or the Ministry of Truth will allow us. Okay, isn't that right? Okay, now, the frustrating thing is we have to get this information out. The problem is we have a censorship. We have this site, Dr. B VIP. Okay, it's 29 bucks for a year, $2.97 a month. But the key is you get everything. So when I show you the link for the CDC information or for the Lancet information, when I show you all of this stuff, you can cut, paste, send it, share it, everything. Okay, it's just we have to have this site that's separate. Now, we also have the Extreme Health Academy. This is 19 bucks a month, but this has got forums. So look at the private sites, and we're also on Library, BitChute, YouTube, as long as they keep us there. And eventually, I'll have an apple cart turned upside down outside and be speaking from that. Now you might be interested because like on the very first slide here, we're looking at lockdowns, we're looking at isolation, lockdowns. So what does the World Health Organization say about lockdowns? Well, this was October 14th. We in the World Health Organization do not advocate lockdown as primary means of control. The only time that lockdown is justified is to buy some time to reorganize, regroup, and rebalance your resources to protect your health workers who are exhausted, but by large, we'd rather not do it. Okay, now I know this was months ago, and we got a really short memory as a population. Flatten the curve. It's only for 2 weeks. We don't want to overwhelm the hospitals. We're going to build hospital ships in Los Angeles and New York. We're going to build extra buildings. Were any of those things utilized? No, no. But this lockdown is still in place. It's only for 2 weeks. It'll be done by Easter. 4th of July was canceled. Thanksgiving was canceled. Any bets on Christmas? Yeah, because this was only going to be a 2-week one. No, this is a pattern here. If you're not aware of that pattern. Now, World Health Organization goes on to say, since the outbreak, the pandemic, scores of nations has implemented lockdowns based on the World Health Organization guidance, which has unleashed a tidal wave of unintended consequences. A tidal wave of unintended consequences. Your business is essential, yours isn't, yours is, yours isn't. Okay? Those people that are not essential, now 30% of those businesses will never reopen, ever. These are families, just insane. And of course, the World Health Organization advocated lockdowns, now they're not. Okay, so now this is crazy. They got different data and they changed their approach. Whoa! Usually government organizations don't do that. Okay, let's look at what happened to small farmers all over the world. Look at what happens to poverty levels. It seems that we may be doubling world poverty by next year. We may have at least a doubling of childhood malnutrition. Anybody remember? We'll shut down the whole economy if it saves just one life. Okay, you ignorant bastard. Okay, shutting down the economy means you're shutting down food production. You're shutting down school lunches. You're eliminating jobs. You're increasing anxiety. Okay, we need to have this discussion, but in a censored world, we can't. The pandemic has been associated with mental health challenges related to the morbidity and mortality caused by the disease and the mitigation activities, including the impact of physical distancing and stay-at-home orders. The World Health Organization is warning about that. We know that deaths of despair could reach almost 800,000 or maybe more next year. We know that the UN, United Nations, warns that the economic downturn could kill hundreds of thousands of children. So when you see these leaders saying, we're going to do these tough measures, like Emperor Newsom, tough measures to just save one life, you idiots. Look at the reality, look at the world. Get off of your high horse and let's do some actual data and research. Stillbirth rates rise dramatically. This thing, September, just a couple of months ago. A slew of studies from around the world has reported a disturbing trend since the corona pandemic started. There's been a significant rise in the proportion of pregnancies ending in stillbirths in which babies die in the womb. Researchers say that in some companies, pregnant women receive less care than they need because of lockdown restrictions and distributions to healthcare. How would you like to be pregnant and your husband gets laid off and you don't have enough money for food and the stimulus check that barely covered your rent is now running out? Would that cause more stress? It's reported that stillbirths increased from 14 per thousand before the country went into lockdown and in March to 21 per thousand by the end of May, a rise of 50%. Now, this is out of medrix.org, population level COVID mortality risk for non-elderly. This means people less than 65. I'll be 61 in a couple of months, so I am less than 65. You lucky people that are over 65, God bless you. Okay, now what they said is they go through the whole proportion. Absolute COVID-19 death risk expressed as equivalent of death risk of driving in a motor vehicle. That's right. Okay, now I didn't say that, so you can't censor me, but you can censor MedX RV on this study. They say that the death rate has similar to driving. So if we really are going to protect the population, maybe we should eliminate all dangerous activity. Of course, we have leaders that are saying that sex is okay as long as you're wearing a mask. Okay. We should eliminate skydiving, drinking caffeinated coffee. I don't know. It's nuts. So we have to organize as long as we have any type of platform. Millions Against Medical Mandates is really a good site, only because I want you to get on this stuff and we got to share it. You are the resistance. You are the underground. You're the ones that even if you don't believe this stuff, that you're still watching CNN every night, or you're like half of my family that couldn't attend Thanksgiving because I'm a pariah. I actually think that immune system is important, and I'm not, getting tested all the time. You can share information like this if you are concerned about masking children who have very, very low risk. Okay, but the psychological risk is huge. If you're looking at I mean the great articles, referenced articles, get on mamm.org. Millions Against Medical Mandates. I mean, it's just you got to support somebody. We can go to the CDC. Now, the Center for Disease Control, again, they have been censored as well, particularly when they print information that could be contrary to the narrative. See, science has never settled on anything. Anything. We only have 7 planets in our galaxy. Oh shit, it's 9. Oh shit, it's back to 8. Oh my God. Do you know what I mean? Science has never settled. Science is a discussion. So here, non-pharmaceutical measures for the pandemic influenza. Excerpt. Although mechanistic studies support the potential effect of hand hygiene and face masks, evidence from 14 randomized controlled trials of these measures did not support a substantial effect on transmission of laboratory confirmed influenza. I mean, mom told you to wash your hands and mom was right. But to force someone? I mean, think of this. Vitamin C is good for you. Okay? If you're not drinking enough water, it can cause kidney stones in rare circumstances if it's a crap type of vitamin C. But even I'm not going to force you to take it. You should have some bodily autonomy. When we look at this, asymptomatic carriers. Can you imagine a virus so deadly that we have to test people that have absolutely no symptoms to see if you have it? I mean, weed is obviously legal in the government or something. How are they coming up with this? I have to tell if you're really sick or not. Let me test you. We're going to get into the testing. But this one, a study of, and again, this is National Institute of Health, a government agency. I'm getting this information off of. The link is there. If you get on, you'll get the PDF format so you can share it. It is debatable whether asymptomatic COVID-19 carriers are contagious. We report a case of asymptomatic patients present with clinical characteristics of 455 contacts which aims to study the infectivity of asymptomatic carriers. They go on, the 455 contacts were exposed to the asymptomatic COVID-19 virus carrier became the subject of our research, divided into 3 groups, 35 patients, 196 family members, 224 office staff. They extracted all the epidemiologic data, clinical records. Summary, all 455 contacts were excluded from SARS-CoV infection, and we conclude that the infectivity of some asymptomatic SARS-CoV-2 carriers might be weak. So when you saw that, this person can infect 2 people, 2 infect 4, 4 infect 8. They forgot to tell you that there's a thing called an immune system. And not everybody is going to be resistant to this, and not everyone is going to be infected by it. Considering that coronaviruses are about 30% of all the common cold and flus, you do have an immune system here. Here's the World Health Organization saying from the data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person transmit onward to a secondary individual. Now, the next day after she said this, I think it was the day after, she totally recounted it. She says, well, from the data, it looks like asymptomatic carriers don't really spread it. But when you look at the percentages and the trends, so if you look at the actual numbers, because think of this, if asymptomatic carriers, okay, are not spreading the disease, okay, like we're told, then why are we testing everyone? But we're going to get into that a little bit, because right there, that is like walking a knife edge with sensors. Okay? Okay, you're right. I didn't say that. We shouldn't test. But here's Dieter Raoult. He is a brilliant guy, okay, in France. He said the current death toll due to coronavirus was equal to about 2% of all viral pneumonia cases. And this figure would probably shrink once the negative cases are accounted for. He doubted that the number of deaths from the virus would increase significantly in France to overtake the number of deaths of pneumonia. And the social media rumors, along with fear, politicians aren't doing enough to make people overreact. Italian, and these are old posts. This is back when I would talk to my friends, and my friends would I'd said, well, it is a virus, and viruses have been around for centuries, and whether this is made in a lab or not, I don't really care, because I got an immune system, and you got 2 things with a virus. Either it's really infective and not that deadly, or really deadly and not that infective. So if you spread it really easily, it gets disseminated through the population. And 2, if I sneeze on the doc here, it's got to use his DNA or RNA to replicate. So it changes a little bit, it weakens a little bit, then he's got to, sneeze on someone else, and that person has to be accepted. And this is how viruses transmit. So I'm not concerned about that. I've got an immune system. But they would always say, because what was the news saying? Italy, overwhelmed, everything. Well, this is from Italy, the Italian governor. 80% of all sick people heal themselves. 15% need medication, and 5% need to have hospital attention. All 17 people who died had advanced health issues. No healthy person who has caught the coronavirus has died. It's an alarm with no foundation. Healthy people getting this. Are they dying? Now, virus experts. Now, this is, okay, cue the angel singing music. Anthony Fauci. Ah! Okay, Fauci went a step further in claiming in all the history of respiratory viruses, asymptomatic transmission has never been the driver of outbreaks. An epidemic is not driven by asymptomatic carriers. Now, if this is presented on the news, you might say, well, why are they testing everybody? Oh, shouldn't we wait for somebody with symptoms and test them? I would think so. Okay, and again, 80%, you keep hearing that thing. Here's from the Center for Disease Control and Promotion. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Okay, recent reports that approximately 80% of COVID-19 patients of all ages experience mild symptoms. Mild to no symptoms, actually. Okay, the majority, and that's what they're finding. Now, you might wonder about the number of cases. because why are there so many cases? Now again, this goes way back in time to March. Okay, this is back when we're ready to flatten the curve and you're only going to shut down businesses for 2 weeks. Do you remember that? Remember that? Okay, and it went into about 8 months long. Okay, well, on a death certificate, if somebody died of something, you should put that cause, except for this virus. And in March 24th, and this is from March 24th, if the death certificate reports terms such as probable COVID-19 or likely, these terms would be assigned a new ICD-9 code. ICD-9 or COVID-19 should be reported on the death certificate for all descendants where the disease is caused or assumed to have caused or have contributed to the death. And this is why in the last few months you may have seen, well, the guy was run over by a truck on a motorcycle, but he died of COVID. Okay, the guy with the 3 rounds of failed chemotherapy just got out of the surgery. He died because of COVID. So this is why the numbers are huge. And this is the actual death certificate that you can change. It is important to emphasize that corona disease 2019 or COVID-19 should be reported on the death certificate for all descendants where it is assumed to have caused or contributed. So the CDC goes in there, and this is back a couple of months ago, and they said, you know what? Those people that died with COVID should be separate from those that died from COVID. Because if you're getting a random test that shows that you were sick, okay, but then you died of like a heart attack, or you had secondary conditions, or you had, like this study found out that the average person dying had 2.6 comorbid conditions. That means they had high blood pressure, diabetes, and a third of some other condition. Okay, inflammatory bowel disease. Okay, something like that. So these are not really healthy people, just like what the governor from Italy said. So they said their numbers are a little off, about by 94%. So healthy people dying from this disease, okay, and we're going to go into the testing on the second part because we can't really go into that on this part because you can't disrespect anybody in the media. That 94% off is a big deal. Now, when this article came out, there was, I think it was around 150,000 to 200,000 people that were listed as COVID deaths. And when you look, when you work the numbers, it was really about 9,000, which is still a lot. However, in America, there's 7,700 people die every day on average. So it's a little bit more than one day's worth of death in America. And I'm not talking about the deaths of despair. I'm not talking about the hundreds of thousands of kids that are going to be mentally and emotionally damaged from not being able to touch their friends or play in schools, or how the World Health Organization now has backtracked and said, oh, gee, by the way, lockdowns don't seem to be really effective. And that 2 weeks to flatten the curve has gone into craziness. Now, these are questions that are censored, that we can't ask, like, how's the virus identified? We're going to go into that on the second half. How resistant is the virus? What can kill the virus? What is different about this virus? What is a virus? Okay, what's the germ theory? How do you strengthen your immune system? Have you heard that? Should people talk about deep sleep, exercise? Oh, no, not in the Empire of California. The beaches are closed. Gyms are closed. Liquor stores and gun shops are open, thank goodness, for you Antifa members. Okay, now let's look at this. Okay, now this was a brilliant experiment because this is what we're actually going through. I'm reading a book called The Third Reich in Power, and it's amazing how you get people, regular people, that can do horrific things. And this experiment was set up by a guy who's trying to answer that question, like how in World War II could you get regular people, and I'm talking auto mechanics, bakers, regular people, to do horrible things under authority? Because that's actually what's happening to our world. So this teacher versus learner experiment. And it was interesting because when they did the experiment, and let me describe this. You had the subject, And the subject is called the teacher. They're sitting at this bench and they have switches. Each switch is thrown, and there's a progressive increasing level of electricity supposedly passed through another participant. That other participant wasn't really being electrocuted, but they were part of it. So they would scream and give the appropriate response. So it started at a very low voltage, but it went up to 450 volts, which is enough to really, really harm you. And what they found is that if the person answered the wrong question, and remember, the subject that's being supposedly electrocuted is part of the test. And then you had a guy in a white coat in authority. And they were doing this to see if human nature, if inside of you, you flipped a switch and you heard, ah, that something inside of you would make you not do that. Okay? Or the person in authority, could they make you do it? Could they? Because they're in authority. And your whole world, and this is the paternalization of the government, this is why they're saying that you're essential, you're not. You're essential, you're not. And this is, you had to serve, in order for you to survive into this life, into adulthood, you had to listen to your parents. So it goes back to that. They were hoping that human nature would win out. However, it didn't. Human nature cannot be counted on to insulate man from brutality and inhumane treatment under the direction of a benevolent authority. But now this, again, in relationship to everything that's going on, I just want you to ask this one question. And good God, I wish I could get my family to watch this. Okay, I mean, part of them are. Is it possible that a malvalent authority exists not only in the history books, but in our times, but that the trust you put in that authority could be used against you? Malevolent. Think of that. Is it possible that a malevolent authority exists not only in history books, but in our time? Yes or yes? But that trust that you put in that authority could be used against you. Is it possible that the trust you put into that authority was wrong? And could the authority be wrong? Is it possible? Well, not if you're watching CNN. Okay, so here you go. Listen to this. No matter what you're doing, you have an authority figure next to you. Please continue to wear the mask. Please continue to social distance. Please continue to respect not going to church or talking to your friends. The experiment requires you to continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no choice but to continue. And each time they do that switch, that was kind of cool echo. 65% of the participants made it to the end. That's 2/3. Okay. All the participants made it to at least 300 volts. Ordinary people are likely to follow orders given by an authority figure, even to the extent of killing an innocent human being. Obedience to authority is ingrained in us from the way we're brought up. People tend to obey orders from people they recognize has authority as moral, right, or legally based. The response to legitimate authority is learned in a variety of situations, such as family, school, workplace. Frightening, because that is exactly what we're going through. Turn in your neighbors. Turn in your neighbors. Snitches don't get stitches. Snitches get rewards. These are the information that's flowing to you from the authority figures. Do not question. If you question, you get censored. If you even question whether a vaccine held at a negative 70 degrees centigrade, that's cold, okay? An experimental with a 2-month safety profile injected into you might have a negative response 2 or 3 years down the road. That kind of question can't be asked because it would be censored. Now, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, because we've gone through this stuff before, and if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. It looks like we're going to repeat this anyway. Now, think of battle. Think of battle and good and evil. We can't do that because we all are that. Okay? If it only were all so simple, if only there were evil people somehow insidiously committing evil deeds, and it was necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. but the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? Remember the Native American. There's two wolves, an evil one and a good one inside each one. Which one do you feed? You know, the one that you feed wins. Okay, so we all have that. We have to respect and love each other, but the freedom is huge. Now, this study, I want to bring this up because this is right before we're going to cut it off because I can't show you this study. The study was done by a student at Johns Hopkins. And I want to read this because this is where I first found this article, and then I went to different links to actually get the copy of the article. Johns Hopkins published this study on Sunday, which posted that COVID is nowhere near the disaster we're being told. I would summarize it for you and pull quotes off, but honestly, you have to read it. The original article is now deleted from the Johns Hopkins website. For some reason, luckily, the internet is forever and available through the Wayback Machine. So I get on to Johns Hopkins and I look at, they have an explanation of why they eliminated this or censored this so that you can no longer see it. Yes, they are smarter than you. You just can't make that own decision for yourself. Editor's note. After the newsletter was published on November 22nd, it was brought to our attention that the coverage of Genevieve Briand's presentation, COVID-19 Deaths, a look at U.S. data, has been used to support dangerous inaccuracies and minimize the impact of the pandemic. We decided November 26th to retract the article to stop the spread of misinformation. As noted on the social media, however, it is a responsibility as journalists to provide a historical record. We have chosen to take down the article from the website, but it's available here as PDF. There's actually two areas that you can get it, okay? In accordance with our standards of transparency, we are sharing with our readers how we came to this decision. Now, I'm going to show you the article, okay, in the second half, because I can't show you on this half because obviously if they censor the article, you know, we're probably going to see, you know, something like this. Okay. Briand's study should not be used exclusively in understanding the impact of COVID, but we should take in context the countless other data published by Johns Hopkins, the World Health Organization, and Center for Disease Control and Prevention. I use those guys' information all the time. Briand was quoting the article saying, all of this points to no evidence that COVID-19 created any excess deaths. The total numbers of deaths are not above normal deaths. This claim is incorrect and does not take into account the spike in raw deaths count from all causes compared to previous years. You will see that that quote right there is incorrect, okay, that she does use real numbers, real world data, and she does use this, but you have to read the article to find out. But if you're only reading this part, you're not going to get that. The newsletter goes on to explain, and then again, this is explaining why they wiped it out. According to the CDC, there have been almost 300,000 excess deaths due to the COVID-19. This evidence does not disprove the severity of COVID-19. An increase in excess deaths is not represented in these proportional because they are offered as percentages, not raw numbers. That is also a lie, and I will show you the article and you will be able to see that. Briand also claimed in her analysis that deaths due to heart disease, respiratory disease, influenza, and pneumonia may be incorrectly categorized as COVID-19 related deaths. In our talk today, I just showed you how the CDC March 14th or 24th said, look, all the deaths, if you think, suspect, maybe, I don't know, assume, okay, you put it down. And then the CDC goes in there to say 94% were died with it, not from it. So again, this is the article that they want to wipe out. However, COVID-19 disproportionately affects those with pre-existing conditions. So those with underlying conditions are statistically more likely to be affected and die from the severe virus. Because of these inaccuracies and our failure to provide additional information about the effects of COVID-19, the newsletter decided to retract this article. It is our duty as a publication to combat the spread of misinformation and to enhance our fact-checking process. We apologize to our readers. Can anybody understand what a fact-checking process is? Do you understand it? Do you understand it? Do you? Like the German reference there? Okay. Yeah, it's called censorship. It's called, I don't care if you take the data and come to a different conclusion. We're not going to have that discussion because it's not appropriate. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to stop the live feed. And I'm sorry about this because the information that's coming up is part of that article. It's also part of the testing process, what the testing process is, how it's done, how accurate it is. Okay, so it's going to be important. I would love to share this with you, but you know, you got to be here, and it won't be live on our Dr. B VIP site either. So there's not a way you can switch and go to the live version. This will be put up in a week, probably the end of this week, like Friday or Saturday, because I got to send it to a buddy of mine that does the editing, and then he does all the stuff that I don't have the skill for. So let's be part of the resistance. Share this, support Millions Against Medical Mandates, support all of the people that you can that are part of this freedom movement, health freedom movement. Because if you really want to decide what's appropriate for you, then join us. If that's too much of a decision for you and you'd rather go with what the government's going to decide for you, God bless you. But at least I want you to have the choice.